Welcome back to New Day. We're talking about Ghana, and the vision for Ghana's long-term development is based on the 1993 Constitution and the aspirations of Ghanaians. Now, specifically by 2057, when Ghana celebrates its 100th independence anniversary, it should be ranked among the high-income countries of the world with an industrialized, diversified, and export-oriented economy that is resilient. And that is what we're doing with a long-term national development plan. My guest in the studio will help us to understand this and see the way forward, and also see how our stakeholders are supporting this very important move. He is the Director General of the National Development Planning Commission, Dr. Nimoy Thompson. So good morning.
Good morning. How are you doing?
Good. I'm doing great. I hope you're doing fine.
I'm all right. Thanks.
Let's start from here. So a long-term national development plan has come about as a result of perhaps issues we see in our development drive.
Yes. Well, first of all, the Constitution, the 1992 Constitution actually requested that we should have a long-term national development plan. It's just that we hadn't come around to completing one. We started with Vision 2020, which didn't turn out too well. And then we abandoned that approach and resorted to medium-term planning, which hasn't also done very well for us. As I said just before we came on air, our sanitation coverage rate, for example, is only 14.4%.
And that's ridiculous.
This is very, very, very low. The average for lower middle income countries is almost 50%, 48 point something percent, and we are at 14%. So it's a reminder that the approach that we've used so far in our almost 60 years of independence hasn't delivered the kinds of results that we want. We've had some positive results, I have to say. It hasn't always been bad. I was telling an audience last week that when we attained independence, we didn't have a single public university. Now we have about 10 public universities, which may sound impressive on its own, but within context, it's still not enough. We have a very low tertiary enrollment ratio, one of the lowest in the world, about 14% or so, compared to South Korea, which is around 100. So while we've made some progress, it's clear that there's room for even more progress to be made as part of a broader efforts to transform our economy and our society. We had a documentary about a month or so ago, and someone complained to us that we had used South Korea as a model of social and economic transformation, and that we should have used a black country to do that, to illustrate the point. So we started looking around, both in Africa and the Caribbean, South America, and we couldn't find any. No. So then the thing was that maybe Ghana is positioned to take on that mantle, because in the 1950s also, Ghana was the pioneer in the independence movement in Africa. Maybe we should also be the pioneer in the socio-economic transformation of various countries. So part of the objective now is to become the economic miracle of the 21st century. And we can do that.
We can do that.
Yes, we can.
Before we even talk about the elements of it, are you being ambitious?
Not at all. Not at all. For instance,
we can get there?
We can. In the development economics, we have something we call the advantages of backwardness. That means when you start late, you have certain advantages in technology, for example. So in the case of Japan, when they were developing, and we've reviewed the economic performance of a lot of countries, including Japan, South Korea, and our own record, and of course existing potential, which inspires us to believe that we can do these things. But when Japan was doing theirs, in those days, well, first of all, we're using what they call telegrams. We studied telegrams a little bit in primary school ourselves, and I don't know, if, let's say you're sending a message to someone, this is Nimoy Thompson, stop, I'm in Koforidua, stop, I'm coming to Accra, stop. That's how primitive it was.
Right.
Today we have WhatsApp, where we send stuff and others. So, exactly. So we start with massive advantage even in communication. Back then, if they wanted to create access to telephones, they had to plant the poles along highways and spend so much time and money. Today, all you have to do is to put one transmitter in the building, an entire community, and not just households, but so the potential is there. It's just a question of us being committed and believing enough in ourselves. As I was telling you, people keep asking where we're going to get the money from. That is taken care of in the plan. But money really...
Should that be a bother at all?
Every plan has a financing component, and we definitely will not prepare a plan without looking at financing. But in the larger scheme of things, financing really shouldn't be, given the way we're approaching it, financing shouldn't be our biggest obstacle. Our biggest obstacle now is self-doubt, where Ghanaians are wondering, can we do this? Can we transform? Can we move from lower middle income country to upper middle income country? No, not upper middle, but lower middle income to high income country in 40 years? And the answer is yes, yes, yes.
We can.
Oh, yes, we can in so many ways. For instance, moving from where we are now, our per capita income, where we are as of last year, to where we want to be, we'll be about 7,000 in terms of increasing our GDP, which is total value of our economic output. That's about 40 billion US dollars now, to where we want to be in 2057. That would be a cumulative increase of about 7,000%. Now, someone will say, well, that's huge. How do you grow by 7,000%? But that's over 40 years. We looked at Korea's growth over the same period, and that was 14,000%. So we are doing 7,000%. They did 14,000. Again, it's a reminder that what we are proposing to do is doable, and it will take us where we want to be. If we manage to attain that, our per capita income, for example, which is now just under 2,000 US dollars, actually substantially less, about 1,500 US dollars, will now increase substantially to about 60,000 US dollars. But we have to stay the course. Now, does that mean that everything is going to flow according to plan? Everything is going to be perfect? No, it's not going. There's going to be discontinuities, disappointments, but the overall trend,
it will be maintained.
Oh, certainly.
That's what you want to see.
I was in Japan and I was asking them how they did theirs, because in 1960 they realized that their per capita income was lower. For instance, it was just 1/3 of that of the UK. So they came up with a plan called the Income Doubling Plan. And I looked at the dates and I realized that they were crossing sometimes. And they said, yes, we made some mistakes, but we had to step back and replan. But the overall trend was an upward one. The same thing, we looked at Ghana, for example. I've told you what we've done. As I speak with you, we're actually building an economic model for the first time to guide us in making some of these decisions. But even before you've done the models, we have what we call rule of thumb approaches where you can use. We've found that if we triple, Japan used an income doubling approach, and they, instead of 10 years, they actually doubled it in 5 years. And then 12 years later. But in the case of Ghana, we can triple our income in 10 years, and then triple it another 10 years, and then double it and double it. In 40 years, we can reach 60,000.
Then you talk about the biggest threat being self-doubt. So where is it on the part of implementers of this strategy, or perhaps the people at the grassroots?
Not grassroots, just the general public, because frankly, the whole idea of long-term planning hasn't formed part of our development discourse for a long time. So it's a relatively new concept, and people are generally now used to new things.
Okay.
And so it takes a while for you to get them to believe that, yes, this can be done. Okay. We happen to be the technocratic organization that's actually doing the analysis, and that's one reason why I'm here, to let the public know that it's not as impossible as
so if you have a leadership that is focused on achieving this, it can drag the people along.
We may even exceed our expectations.
Great. Now let's talk about the goals. You're talking about building an industrialized, inclusive and resilient economy. That's what you're talking about. That's
one of the 5 goals. We have 5 goals. That's the first one on the economy. We have another one on the social aspects, which is equitable, healthy, disciplined society. We have the third one that deals with human settlements. Everyone is complaining about containers and kiosks all over the place, and yet no one is doing anything about it. This is going to form part of it. The fourth one has to do with institutions, governance, effective, efficient, dynamic, responsive. The Constitution says that we should fight corruption. We need all these things to follow. And then the fifth leg of the plan is what we call strengthening Ghana's position in the global economy or within international affairs. So yes, all these things can be done, but there are certain preconditions. The plan by itself it's not a magical document. Right. So it's not just we're not just going to snap our fingers and then we move.
And see the project.
We're going to have to work. We have to sweat a lot. So in terms of industrialization, one of the preconditions we have to meet, obviously, is to address our energy deficit. There's no way you can industrialize without addressing the issue. Within the plan, I don't know if your cameraman
can show this.
Can pick this. Okay, so this is just to give you a sense of exactly what we're talking about. This arrow here represents the long-term plan. And then, and by the way, you can access this on our website. And these are the 10 four-year plans that will then bring, help bring the long-term plan to fruition. So the first one actually starts in 2018 and ends in 2021. And then the second one comes in 2022 and 2025 all the way. So it's not one long plan that is inflexible. The first one, as I said, starts now and then it goes on. And these are simply the visual. These are some of the concepts we're working with.
Right.
So within that here, we have the National Infrastructure Plan. This one is 30 years. And within that, we're going to do so many things. We are going to have a national rail network that will go through every regional capital.
So not to cut in, but so it's not an issue of, let's say, a government in power saying that I'm going to build a road network in 4 years. It is a long-term thing.
It's a long-term thing, and it's going to be partitioned. As I said, the reason why you hear 40, and I don't like using the term 40-year plan because people get scared until you've explained it to them and they realize that, well, it's made up of 10 four-year plans.
Can you this because then the question is, okay, so government comes and goes. So what happens to the plan? That's why I said, so the rail network for 30 years is a thing that is there, and in 30 years we're supposed to achieve it.
Exactly.
So government A is there,
Precisely.
and it leaves, government B comes and continues, government C comes, and that's how
You've just done my work for me, so I think I can chill now.
Okay, right. So then we then again, the manifestos of parties.
Yes.
Do they change anything?
Yes. They become, you see, once we've set the targets, they are there. This is the long-term plan is actually a framework or a vision document that's meant to guide the political parties. So for example, in the case of sanitation, if we set a sanitation target of 35 or 45 for a given point, it is up to the political parties to come up with the strategies that they're going to use to reach that target. Again, as I said, the reason why the targets are good is that sometimes you may be underperforming, but you would not be aware because you're still making progress, but not to the level you should be because you're not aware. So if we're supposed to be at, say, 15 of some indicator, but we started at 3, and you move from 3 to 6, you pat yourself on the back because obviously it's progress. Or 6 to 9, you are still happy. But you really should be at 15. And this is what the plan is meant to do, to force us. And in looking at the development long-term plans of other countries, we realize that merely having the long-term plan itself, one, it inspires confidence in the public once they understand and rally around that. Two, it helps to create a sense of urgency. One of the biggest obstacles to development in this country is that we are too laid back. There's no sense of urgency, virtually nothing. A lot of laws we have or we need to move this country forward have been in the policy maze for between 10 and 20 years. I was at a meeting last week, I believe, where someone was talking about a law that's now been sent to Parliament. It's been under preparation since 1999. So once you have a plan like this, you need to develop a sense of urgency. And this is what, there's a whole slate of policy reforms or structural reforms that will have to be carried out before the plan can be successful. So one of them, I will just quickly go through some of them. One is called the Land Bill, which is now under consideration. Because without resolving the issue of land acquisition and utilization in Ghana, the infrastructure plan, for instance, cannot be done. India is having that problem. The new Prime Minister Modi wants to have a similar kind of development infrastructure, but land acquisition is a problem. And we know the issue of land in Ghana, so we're working on that. There's another law called the Land Use and Spatial Planning Bill, which is now before Parliament. We have the Governance Bill, because local government will play a key role. Ultimately, development occurs at the local level. And so whatever laws we have that get in the way of enforcing things and so forth and so on, they are all being worked on now. But lastly, let me again demystify the 40 just so people understand. The average age for president under the Fourth Republic is around 56 years old. The average age. What that means is that the person who would be president of Ghana in 2057 is already maybe in JHS now or SHS or possibly even in university, in the sense the future is here. Now, there are two streams or what we call signposts for the long-term plan. One is the 10 medium-term plans that will make up the 40 years. But it also happens that between 2020 in 2056, we'll also have 10 elections. So 10 medium-term plans, 10 elections that just fit perfectly. Every child born this year will be 40 years in 2056, and therefore will qualify to run for president in 2056. So let's say you want to be the father or the mother of the president in 2057. This is your very last year to make a baby.
I see. That's great.
So you qualify, I suppose.
I do. But let's talk about the excitement is about the infrastructure project that we saw in that plan. And that is where it excites people.
Yes.
These are things that are achievable, but in getting there, are challenges that confront us, and how do we go around these challenges?
As I said, we will have to pass the laws or carry out the reforms to free the resources or to free the productive capacity of the economy. Our economy and society are currently repressed largely because of certain laws and policies that do not stimulate creativity and productivity and so forth and so on. So the public sector itself will have to undergo massive transformation and modernization. We cannot have the kind of transformation we want with the kind of public sector we have now, where there's massive issues of inefficiency, so pervasive. Look at the practice, for example, where these days virtually every government office feels that it must have a flat screen TV in the offices, in the reception halls, and you go there during working hours when they should be working. They're rather watching is it what they call kumchacha or whatever, these telling when they shouldn't be doing. So we've actually raised that concern with the Ministry for Public Sector Reforms, that particular practice is one of the things that we're going to tackle under the long term in terms of the institutional reforms. There shouldn't be any television sets where you are supposed to be working, for example. We've created a situation where our budgeting practice or tradition is such that people get paid, and thereafter we have virtually nothing for them to work with. We need to change that. So budgetary reforms themselves will have to come along for us to be able to realize our full potential. In terms of spending for the infrastructure, as I said, just the mere discussion of it has triggered interests all over the world. Right. We do get diagnostics for people who
the Black Star Stadium.
The Black Star Stadium. In fact, there have been two proposals.
All of them will get it.
Oh, the Black Star. The Black Star Stadium. I don't know if your guys could show that at some point. The current strategy is that we'll let each region bid, and it will be part. You see, in developing comprehensive infrastructure, usually it helps for you to, that's what they're showing now. Okay. That's the Black Star Stadium there. But in developing infrastructure, sometimes you host an international tournament and use that to develop other infrastructure. So in the case of Japan, they used the 1964 Olympics to transform their infrastructure. More recently, in 2010, South Africa used the World Cup. So when you go to South Africa now, the nice highway that you see between Johannesburg and Pretoria is fairly recent. You go to Cape Town, the nice transport system you see there is going. So for us, the Black Star Stadium is going to be one of several pieces of infrastructure that will be the basis of this. The entire roof, for example, will be made up of solar panels as a way of creating a self-sustaining energy center for it. The waste and everything will all be converted into electricity. It will have the stars. The 5 stars you see there will actually be buildings, so offices, shops, and so forth and so on. We are proposing the establishment of a national sports museum there. What that means, along with the others, is that this is going to be not a stadium where you play 1 or 2 soccer matches and it just sits there. No, this is going to be 24 hours, 365 a year, where tourists are going to come in from Ghana, from outside, because we've made a name for ourselves. People want to see, you go there, maybe you see something about the Yu family. There's a whole family tree that you trace there. You sell stuff, maybe T-shirts, mugs, and whatnot, which also leads to one of the laws that we have to pass, the issue of property rights. Okay. No, intellectual property rights and copyrights, such that, because, see, you don't want a situation where you agree with a company to print T-shirts for a particular purpose and someone sits in their house somewhere and does the same. So all these things will have to be carried out in order for us to read that. So the infrastructure plan is going to be the spine. But as I said, Already, we are receiving the UN Office for Project Services came to us and said, wait a second, we hear that Ghana is doing a 40-year long-term development plan or framework or vision document. You are the kind of country we are looking for to work with. And they even propose that for the kind of thing we want to do, they suggest 40 to 50-year time frame.
Right.
And there's a lot of money, over 70 trillion US dollars. If we go for just 0.5% of that, that would be over 350 million US dollars that will come in. I'm told that there's a Ghanaian team that actually wants to build a sky rail from Iburi to Accra as a result of this. So just the mere discussion of the plan
triggers other investments.
Exactly.
But before all these is achieved, the laws you spoke about, the land bill, the land use spatial planning, all of them would have been in place then.
Oh, most definitely. Most definitely. They are happening. They are happening. In fact, they probably should pass by the end of this year because they are already in Parliament. We've listed about 10 or 12 different laws that we think need to be in place to be able to carry out these things. Now, it's not enough to build infrastructure. The laws or policies that govern the use of that infrastructure is equally important. And how we use them. You don't want to build... So
that you can even get the land for the Black Star Stadium.
That's one way, because we want a situation where each region will say, well, bring it to my region, because we have this and this and this. For instance, in this thing here that I showed you, there's a picture here of what the future Ghanaian house would look like. At some point, we're going to outlaw the construction of septic tanks. Because every time you build a house, you have every single town and city in Ghana will be required to have a central sewage treatment system. So the issue of these things will all go away. So that will then plug in directly into the stadium and so forth. It's a very comprehensive approach.
Let's watch the Tema Buankra Port 2.
Okay, that's one of those.
Yes, that's one of the infrastructure.
Yes, most definitely.
Now, how key is that one too?
It's very, very critical. It will help free. Yeah, this is the Tema train station as envisioned under the plan. So that's one. And there's several others that we've done. And then this is the Buankra inland port. And those things you see there, the storage facilities.
Silos.
Yeah, they have silos. They have regular storage facilities. Some of them will be taken. So rather than these huge trucks carrying stuff from here, they'll be taken directly by rail to Kumasi. And there they will be distributed. That's what we call the logistics. It's part of the logistics development that we are going to be having. And so our highways, for instance, will be freed of these huge articulated trucks that break down and cause accidents and so forth and so on. And everything you see there is named, I think that's Burkina Faso over there, then Niger and Mali and so forth and so on. So that's one aspect of it. And then one of the videos, which I'm sure they will show later on, is that of the Kumasi train station.
Okay, we'll quickly show that one too.
That was one of the most active train stations. I think besides Takrade, that was the most active train station in Ghana. Unfortunately, this is it. From the sky, as you see it, it's been in disuse for decades, not years, but decades. Obviously, it's been overtaken by traders. I grew up in Kumasi, by the way, so I'm very familiar with this train station. Oh, yes, yes. I have some very nostalgic memories of how we used to travel on that train. Now, it's all been taken over by traders. And we sent a drone to go. You see the rails there in the middle there. Yeah, the foreground actually has grass and all that. So everything is covered over there. And this is the future as we envision it. The same rail station transformed. And now people find it hard to believe that, well, we can actually transform Kumasi into this. And the question is, why can we not do that? And now there are others. If you go to Europe, if you go to Germany and all these things, at the end of the Second World War, you see some pictures where Germans were feasting on dead horses. That's how bad it was. Everything had been destroyed. And yet you wouldn't imagine that. This is actually the main train station. This would be at the central market area. For Kumasi, we are looking at, within the plan, we have what we call city regions. So there's a Kumasi city region and then there's Accra city region. For Kumasi, there's going to be a rail line for now, starting from Kwadaso, and then it'll come through Bantama, then from Bantama to Idum, the central business district, because it's both commercial and business, and from there it'll go to maybe Ofurukrom, and then Tech, and then to Idriso, because Idriso also remains one underutilized potential. And again, another thing with the long-term plan is that it also helps to revive, or at least give life to other policies that otherwise wouldn't get that life. And in the case of Kumasi in 2012, we had what they call the Greater Kumasi Metropolitan Plan, which unfortunately has not been played. They had what they call Kumasi Idrisu Corridor, which has since been abandoned. We are reviving all these things and giving them life.
Okay.
And the most inspirational thing is that we now have investors, some even call out the Ghana mission to the UN in New York and saying, what is going on? We've heard that you guys are developing an infrastructure plan. We want to be a part of it. Ghanaian businessmen and women are also. In fact, our biggest challenge, really, as we see it, and it's listed in the infrastructure plan, is our capacity to develop. So to provide the infrastructure. Because we need a certain number of engineers, we need a certain number of architects, we need a certain number of welders. There's a section there that's going to deal with the human resources that we need.
Okay. Now let's quickly talk about the street concept before we deal with winning Ghana off foreign aid.
Yeah, they can show that also. Yes. What you see there on the right is actually the Ifwa Sutherland Park aspect. This is for Accra. And the street concept, too. You know, this morning when I was coming, I was actually worried that I was going to be late because there's nothing predictable, about our transport system. So you see the dedicated lanes on the right and left-hand sides. And obviously we have to respect the law. In other countries, if you dare drive in the red lane, you are in serious trouble. In Ghana, some trouble will probably try and pick up passengers there. We're going to have to deal with that aspect of it. So, as I said, bringing the fiscal infrastructure into existence is one thing. Actually managing it. And of course, with this one, this is the infrastructure. It will go with what we call the spatial development framework. As I showed that we have the spatial development framework here and then the infrastructure. The spatial development framework is the one that will make sure that we plan well. There are streets, there are trees. Recently when I spoke about
so that you don't walk into somebody's bedroom. You are in a lane and then before you realize
there's a place at Legon actually where the street is so close to somebody's house that if you extend your the green ones are for bicycles. Right. So we call them smart roads where you can, sometimes I feel like biking honestly, but I'm afraid to get on my bike in Accra. I may end up in an open gutter staring up in the sky. So we're going to have to do all these things. It will have to be a structure. That's why we said disciplined society. When we went around the country, people were concerned about the issue of indiscipline. But the problem is that everyone thinks that the problem is someone else's problem. It's our collective problem. I have to be disciplined, you have to be, everyone. We are all disciplined in various ways, but we also need to build institutions that will reinforce discipline. And I'll give you an example. We've taken to this thing of, National Sanitation Day, which clearly doesn't make sense. In the initial days, it helped to raise awareness, but it cannot be the solution to problems of sanitation. Because we can't wait for 29 days and allow people to put garbage in the gutters, and then on the 30th day, you want to freeze economic activity, you want to deprive people of their weekends to go and clean gutters. Now, after this interview, if you go to the City House traffic light, you see that the city, for what it's worth, has actually put up their garbage bins, dustbins, and you see that the public is actually using those dustbins. There's nothing on the ground. They put them there. So if the municipalities can actually meet the public halfway, we will have a clean society. Rather than waiting for 29 days and then going to clean gutters. It's not even healthy for you to be doing that because there are a lot of dangerous things in it. You can actually get cut by some rusted stuff and so forth and so on. So we want to be able to have a more comprehensive, more visionary approach to managing our affairs.
Okay, grateful. So these achievements and these laudable ideas, of course, will take a lot of work. It means demolition and rebuilding some of these structures. That's how the form it is going to take. But eventually, this is expected to win Ghana off international aid and push us to another level. How key is this in achieving what we saw on the screens?
Yes. Well, first of all, the issue of winning ourselves foreign aid, of foreign aid, is as much psychological as it is financial. Too often our leaders, and this is the part, perhaps part of the colonial legacy, this goes way back, where every time we're in the presence of quote-unquote white man, and we define a white man to include anyone from Bangladesh to India to Pakistan to Canada and other, whenever we find ourselves in their presence, we think we must beg for something, even when we don't need that, even when we're capable of providing those things ourselves. Just before we came on, I told you that we're also doing an analysis of local economies, and we found that AMA's economy is about $5 billion US. Big, just AMA. And yet you pick up the papers and the mayor of Accra is receiving a check for 150,000 US dollars from Turkey. One is demeaning. Two, it's also a reflection of the fact that we haven't explored our own potential for development. So gradually we need to win ourselves others. Foreign aid has a way of crippling initiative. Sometimes it can help in terms of getting certain institutions, but beyond that, we need to take over. Too often we fold our arms, and you see stories like that where policies are developed and we cannot even print them and distribute them because, well, the donor's responsibility stopped at the portion of developing the policy. We are supposed to print, and they say, well, we're waiting for the donors to give us money and so forth. You just cannot do that. I remember years ago there was an instance in one of these African countries where the donors evidently didn't have money to buy condoms for them. And they said, well, if they don't bring the condoms, HIV infections will go up. That's so irresponsible.
Right.
Because donor doesn't give you condoms. You're just going to sleep around anyhow and contract. So the psychological shift itself will have to occur first. And then we begin to strengthen our own domestic resources in terms of resource mobilization. As the economy expands, we also expect that the revenue GDP ratio will also rise substantially. But then once you raise the money, you need to use it efficiently. That's where public financial management issues come in.
Let's wrap up our conversation. So this plan then would have to be in such a way that we simply can't ignore to go by it.
No, we can't. Because
put it there and think that political parties or whichever government will go by.
Yeah, first of all, the Constitution requires it. In 2011, Parliament also passed a law, Act 815, that says that we should have a long-term national development plan. And then the report of the Constitution Review Commission also recommends that we should do that. But we want to go beyond that and work with all the parties. That's why, unfortunately, they didn't show the tape of the political parties expressing. There were 6 of them that came to the, and we've worked with them in all the various consultations.
Is that assuring enough? That's a start.
It has never been done before.
Okay.
In the past, we've tended to look at this in terms of partisan lenses and other. Now we've all rallied around that, and not just for Ghana. Actually, the word has gotten out there, and other countries in Africa are saying, "Wait, is that how you are handling that issue? The issue of continuity for the long term, because you need continuity for the long term, and also the change that comes with political party elections." So Sierra Leone, for instance, has already sent delegations here to come and study our system. Nigeria sent people from the Institute for Policy and Strategic Studies. They've been here. Guinea wants to send people. Lesotho should have come in here about 2 or 3 weeks ago, but it was rescheduled. So that approach is very innovative in the sense that it brings everyone together, helps to foster continuity, at the same time provide the flexibility for political parties to do that which they want to do. There may be a political party that says, okay, we all agree on the targets, but we will use the private sector to drive that. Another political party said, no, we agree on the targets, but we prefer the state to lead that. Another one may take the middle route and say, okay, we want to, but ultimately we'll all want. That's what we say. It's one nation, one vision, one destination.
Doc, I'm grateful.
Thank you
for your time this morning. Dr. Nimue Thompson is the Director General, National Development Planning Commission. We've been looking at Ghana's long-term national development plan.